everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is the third film in the trilogy, but the seventh movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to feature this ragtag team. In addition to the first two movies, they appeared in Avengers Infinity War, Endgame, a brief cameo in Thor Love and Thunder, and they had their holiday special. So this is basically the final swan song for the group as we know it, as well as James Gunn's final run within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This movie takes place sometime after the Guardians and Thor have gone their separate ways, and they established an HQ on Nowhere and spent Christmas together. In fact, the opening of the movie is actually quite somber, with Peter Quill drunk off his ass, and the Guardians just kind of living their life on Nowhere. Suddenly, the Guardians are attacked by a being created by the Sovereign, Adam Warlock, and this results in a huge battle where Rocket is critically injured and is on the verge of death. So the Guardians have to do everything possible to save their friend, and this also includes teaming up with this other Gamora, who's now the head of the Ravagers, as well as encountering a villain who's vital to Rocket's backstory. This sub-franchise in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has had an interesting history, because prior to the events of the first movie in 2014, people didn't really know that much about the Guardians unless you were a hardcore comic fan. Like, Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America were all known by name, even if not extensively, but the Guardians of the Galaxy was so absurd and so, I don't want to say underground, but it definitely wasn't as popular in the mainstream as some of those other characters were, even prior to their films. But thanks to the first movie, they gained a ton of popularity and had become one of Marvel's flagship franchises. And I really loved that first movie. Volume 2, when I first saw it, I didn't really like it all that much at first. I thought it was decent, but it felt a little tiring. And then 2 years later, when I rewatched it in prep for Avengers Endgame, I did a complete 180, where it went from being one of my least favorite movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to one of my absolute favorites. In fact, it would have been in my top 10 of Marvel movies had it not been for Black Panther, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. You heard right. I love this movie. I will go so far as to say that this is single-handedly the best movie of the trilogy. And it's a perfect example of why I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe and why I'll continue to be a fan regardless if they have a few bumps along the way. If I'm a fan of these characters and want to see how their story progresses and how they develop over time, then that's all I need for this to be a really good movie. Because when it comes to reviewing movies, I feel like I'm more of a character guy than a story guy. A good story always helps, but for me, it's how I feel about the characters. And because of how these characters are so well defined, this ends up being the most emotionally powerful of all the movies. And at the center of this emotional weight is Rocket Raccoon, once again voiced by Bradley Cooper and performed via motion capture by James Gunn. The movie functions as a Rocket Raccoon origin story where we see his past, the friends that he grew up with, and why he became the character that we know him as. And it also centers around the other characters trying to save his life. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that when they first announced Guardians of the Galaxy that we would ever take a talking anthropomorphic gun-wielding raccoon and an alien tree with few words seriously, but James Gunn managed to make that work several times over. And I'll even give credit to the Russos in Infinity War and Endgame for making us get emotional over these characters. And that's not to put down the rest of the other characters either, because each Guardian member gets their time to shine, and we get a clear understanding of why each of these characters belongs on this team. Peter Quill, for example, has some character growth throughout the end of the movie, and Chris Pratt is actually the best he's ever been in this role. I know it's really easy to make fun of this guy and criticize him for his beliefs, which I don't blame anyone who does that, but it's in movies like this where you're reminded that he actually can be a really good actor if you give him the right material. Like with Jurassic World, he feels so out of place twice, and his character is so boring. Peter Quill actually has a lot of depth going for him, and Chris Pratt manages to nail this performance. This is probably the most I've ever liked and felt sympathy for the character. Although if I had a nitpick about Peter Quill, and you could call this a spoiler, it's just more of a warning, he doesn't have the cool helmet. He doesn't wear it at all in this movie, which is a damn shame, but whatever, that's a nitpick. Drax is more than just a bumbling idiot. Mantis has a lot more to offer than just being really kind and basically being emotional support. And Nebula gets a lot more beyond just being angry and mean-spirited. And with this Gamora from another universe, we get to see the Peter Quill-Gamora dynamic play out in a different way. All of these characters are just so well developed, have great camaraderie with each other, and the way it ends, I won't spoil anything, but it feels very sad, but also makes me curious on seeing where we go from here. Because anyone who's read the comics knows that the Guardians of the Galaxy is much like the X-Men or the Avengers. The roster is constantly changing, so we'll see what the future holds in store for these characters, even if James Gunn's not around anymore. And then you have the villain of the movie, the High Evolutionary, played by Chukwudi Iwuji. Let me say this about this villain. He doesn't have a lot of depth to him. He's actually quite shallow in terms of like character development. But man, it feels so refreshing to see a villain that you just straight up hate. Like, this character is a complete piece of shit, and you really want to see him get his comeuppance. This character is actually quite important when it comes to Rocket's backstory, and more the reason you want to see this guy suffer and really get it worse than any other Marvel villain is because he commits a lot of animal cruelty acts. And as an animal lover, it just makes me hate this guy even more. So he's not as interesting as some Marvel characters before him. He doesn't carry any sympathy like Zemo or Namor or Killmonger did, nor do you have an understanding of his motivation the way you did with Thanos, because the High Evolutionary basically wants to play God, and it's like he wants total control of everything, whereas Thanos did what he did in Infinity War because he figured it would benefit everyone, and Thanos had the proof to back it up, whereas the High Evolutionary is just a madman, and what happens to him at the end is so rewarding. It is so worth waiting through 2.5 hours, which I gotta say, for a 2.5 hour movie, it didn't feel like it. It moved at a really great pace. Though I have to say, if there's any criticism with this movie being this long, it's that I don't know if I really have the time to go out and see it again, because I want to. It's my favorite movie in the trilogy, but that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to rewatch Captain America Civil War in theaters, because it's like I gotta plan out my day and put 2.5 hours aside to see this movie again. Now, in terms of actual criticisms with the movie, I thought Cosmo was kind of pushed to the sideline. When Maria Bakalova was cast as Cosmo, I thought that was cool casting because she was great in Borat 2, and I really liked her in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. But in the holiday special and in this, she doesn't really get a whole lot to do. I mean, she gets her big moment to shine at the end of the movie, and there's a good running gag throughout the movie between her and Kraglin, but she doesn't really contribute a whole lot to the movie. And then Adam Warlock, despite being teased at the end of Volume 2, I felt like he was kind of an afterthought. He only shows up every now and then. I liked Will Poulter in this role, and there were a few moments where Adam Warlock actually got a few laughs out of me, but I don't think the character was handled all that well. He felt really out of place and only popped up when convenient. But really, at the end of the day, this is still a great movie. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe not really being in its golden age like it was in the Infinity Saga, this is a breath of fresh air, because it encompasses everything that I love about the franchise, the creativity, the characters that I love, the grand spectacle of it all. And this movie probably was the most emotional I got in the franchise since Endgame. And I don't think I'll go quite that far to say get off your ass and go see it right now, but it is easily worth seeing in your lifetime. It's a great send-off for these characters. The comedy isn't as overboard as it was in Volume 2, and it's a beautiful looking movie in terms of cinematography, production design, and special effects. And it's so funny to think that the worst Marvel movie is followed up by one of the best. So that is such a change in pace, and just when I was about to give up on the MCU thanks to Quantumania, it pulls me back in with this. And there you go, that's my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I hope you enjoyed it, and now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.